Hello, hello, and welcome back to another episode of The Way of the High Priestess. I am jazzed because today I am joined by Dr. Gertrude Lyons, and she is doing some incredible work in the world. We got to have a really powerful conversation just a few weeks ago on her podcast, which I'll include in the show notes. But she is a leading edge trainer and educator in human emergence, lifestyle, parenting, leadership development, career, relationship satisfaction, and success. She is huge in the space of women's development, and through her work, she inspires people to take control of their own personal transformations. She's made it her mission to challenge traditional notions of mothering by facilitating raw, open conversations around mothering, womanhood, and parenthood that no one else is having. And you are going to hear one of those conversations right here today. She has spent the last 18 years empowering individuals, couples, and parents to bring out their best selves through helping them realize meaningful, successful lives with the aim of bringing new perspectives on personal transformation to as many people as possible. And really, her mission is to help women reclaim their lives through mothering and create a safe space where women can express their dreams, fears, and truths around motherhood. We are all mothers, and together we can support and empower one another to be the best versions of ourselves. Gertrude, welcome. I'm so happy to have you here.
Lee, it's such an honor, and I'm so excited to be, as you said, back with you. But to be on your show, I'm just very grateful and thrilled.
Yeah, same. So the first thing that stood out to me when I started getting to know you through social media was this concept of mothering.
Mhm.
Now, as someone that doesn't have any children of my own, that kind of sparked my interest because it's not a journey that I relate to yet. So you often talk about mothering being for everyone. So tell us more about what mothering is exactly and why that's a journey that we can all go on, particularly as women.
Sure. No, it's such a just to give a quick backstory on how that aspect of the work I was doing came to be, which so I'm so grateful for actually. But because when I did my doctorate, my whole study was on raising women's awareness on the transformational opportunity in mothering. But I was, I will say honestly, kind of focused on preparing women who wanted to have children. So the study I did drew a group of women together that did not have children, but were at various stages of either wanting them for sure, weren't sure, kind of that whole gamut. Um, and what I realized when I did that and got this particular group of women together and work that I had been doing myself in my own mentoring and coaching and development through the Wright Foundation and Dr. Judith Wright, which was in the back of the mind. I kind of threw it into the seminar as, just something to add a perspective, which was this concept that we all mother, that all women mother, actually all human beings mother. We have a mothering, aspect in all of us, the value, the everything from the noun and adjective. It lives in all of us. But when I presented that to the group, that, hey, wherever you are in your journey, we all mother. Everyone has the capacity, and particularly when you look at the literal makeup of a woman in a womb and creativity, and it's not just metaphoric that we have a womb. Like, we create. That's in our being. It's our essence, right?
Yeah.
To conceive, create, and give birth, not to children. Sure, that's miraculous and amazing experience, but also to dreams, our careers, relationships, anything that we're, focusing our caring, our concern, our energy, in a really, everything from intense to not, we can mother something kind of, or, full out. Um, but that the most important person we needed to mother was ourselves. And that just hit such a strong chord with all the women. I mean, everything and we'll be talking more about rewriting the mother code, but that particularly just gave so many women so much more space, right? Like, it just allowed them to kind of let go of the, like, myths that I outline around, particularly around mothering. And one of them being, well, I'm not a woman I'm not really a woman if I don't have a child. Like, that's this patriarchal notion that has been built into our wiring and just our system so strongly that that's what we're here for, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that's why we were put on this earth to,
Yeah.
birth babies and raise them. And like, really? Like that's like our whole reason for being. It's certainly one beautiful one, but I think we all know, and we know it intuitively, but it's been wired in so strongly. We all kind of believe it in there, but this
Yeah.
gave an opening to loosen the grip of that and start letting go of it.
Mm. There are a couple of things that you shared that I really want to get into because, on this podcast, I talk directly and indirectly about this archetype of the high priestess and who the high priestess is in our modern day embodiment.
Mm.
And one of the things that I have found to be the most powerful for me was healing my mother wound with my biological mother, but also
Mhm.
learning to mother myself. And
Yeah.
that was something along the way that had really challenged me in how I was growing and expanding. But you'd mentioned rewriting the mother code. Is that a literal rewriting of our relationship with our biological mothers, or what does that entail, and how does that help us step into the fullness of who we are as women?
Yeah. Thank you. Well, it's exactly, so we can, right? But and it has pieces. It's everything that you said, right? So it is um, what I talked about first of all in the first question around expanding the definition that we all mother. That's an aspect of rewriting the mother code. But then the down and dirty work that really has to get done before we can really like and embrace that concept and live into it is rewiring from our histories, from our childhoods,
Mhm.
and mother wound, yes, for sure. Father wound, caregiver wound, just
Yeah,
everything that like in our formation, that's wired in us, our mistaken beliefs, who we think we are, and why we're supposed, what we think the world is all about, and all of those, for better or worse, that get wired in, is to take that deep dive in and really exploit them, see them for what they are, heal around them, and then we can start making our own choices and decisions and start tuning into ourselves, right? And then culturally, so there's the childhood aspect and then cultural aspect of the wiring that's here in our given moment that's so powerful, particularly around mothering, and that one that I mentioned, and all the whole range of them about how it's supposed to go and your choices around having children, not having children, then if you do, how it's supposed to go and who
yeah,
you're supposed to be and all of that, and really disrupting those paradigms. And then once we do that, we can sort through and really truly create a vision for ourselves and who and how and what we want to mother and just what it's going to look like and mean to us and not
yeah,
from the outside.
yeah. Something just came through as you were sharing that. I have so many questions, and I please do wrap your own personal story into
Sure.
any of this as it comes up. I'm just geeking out over here. So,
The
one of the things that
same.
I've seen on the path is that we form these identities of who we are as children of mothers based on the relationship with our mother or caregiver that we formed,
Mhm.
and then those of us who go into biological motherhood and birth our own child or adopt a child, as those of us who go on to do that, we then have another identity around what it means to be a mother. So we have this identity around what it means to be a child, what it means to be a mother. And it feels like there are, I'll say burdens, but I think until we learn to question, there are expectations, or we have an expectation of who we're meant to be.
Mm.
So as we're stepping into this fullest version of ourselves and mothering ourselves, mothering our creations, perhaps mothering our children, where's the first place to start as we're reconciling our identity, how we feel? Because I know that until I learn to question that I don't have to feel a certain way or that I don't have to show up and perform a certain way, that for me, it was in a complete blind spot. So I had no idea that I could even question who I am as a daughter. And I would likely have had no idea to question my identity as a mother unless I were doing the inner work. So where do people start if listeners are hearing this and this is the first time that they're learning of this concept? Where do people begin in this mothering process? And does it start with mothering ourselves? So,
Yeah,
all right, so break it down for us.
it does, and it's interesting because kind of we can be at so many different places when the urge comes to like, I don't know, like yearn for more, right? Or know that like things can be going along fine, or you think you're kind of doing the thing you thought you could or should be doing. But you know that like, what else is there? Or, something, or there's a problem. That usually is what prompts us, I have to say, like for me, it was when I got engaged
Mm.
to be married to my husband. And I was young. I was 23 when I got engaged. 20,
Wow.
yeah. Yeah, so young. I'm 24. Yeah, I was literally 24 when I got married, which now I just freaks me out. Because I have two daughters who are 20, almost 23 and 25.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, I'm like, wait, okay. So anyway, sidetrack. Um, but that was the big, happening. And and sometimes it happens like this, somebody just says something to you that sparks something, because I was in no way, I had no introduction to self-development or
Mm.
that questioning. And I'll say a little bit more about that in a second. Um, so when my boss at the time, when I announced to him that I got engaged, I'm all excited, right? Bounce into the office and he's like, oh, kind of like, well, um, my best advice for you is to do premarital counseling.
Okay. Where I don't,
And I was
are you
like,
asking for advice?
no. But I mean, I hadn't been there that long, honestly, but I'd gotten to know there were only three of us. It was a startup, a small company. And I was very aware that he was in the midst of a contentious divorce.
Ah,
And, so his framework, I could understand, but it was the best advice, unsolicited advice I have probably ever gotten, because even though it's like following that yearning or that inkling. It's like, like, why would I do that? Like, I'm marrying this great guy. Like
right, right.
like he's in my limited thinking at the time, like he's handsome, he's masculine, he's super smart, and he has money. Like that was my checklist. Right.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I didn't, well, do you even know how to be in a relationship? And then, just
Mm.
taking a second to think about, and I was so glad for whatever reason, like a glimmer of light came in. It's like, oh yeah, my parents really have, if I look at them as a model, they're on the brink of divorce. And my husband's parents, like they're both on their second marriages, and his mom's married to a second alcoholic. Oh, like, gosh, maybe it'd be good to talk to somebody.
Yeah.
and and still in my mind though, I'm like, I have this great catch and I want to keep them. Right. I can't say it was even like that, but it was enough to get started. So when you say like, what is it that you do first? It's like, follow that inkling, like, and this was back in 1989, coaching, I love that things are more accessible, more available. It isn't so taboo. You don't so much feel like you have to have a problem
Right.
to, go on a personal journey. And it was, so the biggest thing I could say is just start, right? And that's, as you said, you've been on a path of mothering yourself. To me, that's the ultimate mothering yourself, is your personal work, right? Like, and staying, engaged, where you're not just introspecting, you're
Yeah.
trying new behaviors, but so the beginning of my journey definitely was, wow, it didn't take long in these first sessions. And we took it on. Oh, well, first of all, like the fact that my husband then agreed to do it was miracle number two, right? Because he didn't know what the heck was going on and why would he do that? And who does my boss think he is telling us to go do this thing, whatever. All right, I guess I'll go. But luckily, I mean, I feel very grateful. We both like sat in that session and found meaning, have
Yeah.
somebody kind of reflect back to you, like what may have been going on in your formation and what some things that might be happening already in your relationship, and just to be seen like that, and to know that, oh, like it doesn't have to be this way. We don't have to repeat
Mm,
the patterns, from our upbringings, and we can
yes.
start exploring it. And then I think the thing to know is like, it's then a lifelong journey, right? And
Yeah.
to whatever degree, you want to take it on, it isn't 5 easy steps. It isn't, 6 months of couples coaching and we're on our way. It's a
Right.
continuous exploration, which is a beautiful exploration. And it's a rebirthing and birthing of yourself through your adult life, because I don't think that
Right.
ever ends. I mean, I'm going through a huge rebirth now with our daughters, full on leaving and going through menopause. Right. And we
Yeah.
talked about that a little bit on my podcast. And, I'm thrown back into, regressive, all sorts of things and relationship stuff. And there's always an opportunity for us to go deeper and learn
Yeah.
more.
Yeah. I'm curious to hear, and pick any point in your mothering process. It could be
Sure.
mothering of yourself, it could be mothering of your children, it could be this beautiful phase that you're entering into now. But what were some of the most pervasive emotional states that came up for you? As in, what felt most challenging? And when those challenging states came up, how did you mother? Like,
Mm.
what was the, yeah, how did you mother? How did you handle those challenging emotions within yourself?
Yeah, thanks. Well, if there's two that come to mind, one I feel like I navigated really well, and another I feel like I didn't navigate well at all, which kind of led me to doing what I'm doing now.
Oh, great. Perfect. The
Yeah,
backstory.
exactly. But I would say, you know, uh, when Rich and I did, the whole unraveling, like I had a very enmeshed relationship with my mother, right? Like that was the role I chose to take on in the family system, and really kind of turned over a fair amount of my own thinking, whatever, like her approval meant everything. And it was fairly robotic. Right. But, so right after we got married, and not long after that, we're in a conversation. She said, "Oh, well, now you can have kids, or now it's time to have kids." And I had now had a year, at least a year, maybe two of growth work under my belt. And instead of just like, oh my God, but I could hear it, right? I could hear the voice like, oh, like now it's time to have kids. Like my mom just said so. But to
Mm,
feel, so fear is a big emotion that I let run my life for a long time, like fear of disapproval, fear of not doing it right, fear of upsetting my mother. Right. And I just came out with this like powerful, I don't know, you know, that is not what we're doing. And not just because you're telling me I shouldn't. It's like we've decided that it's something that means we want to be married for a while before we invite children into our life. So that was like, those were like kind of a lot of moments like that. But then I would say a couple like that were really poignant, again, kind of and I would say fear would be the underlying emotion. But when we did decide about 6 years later to start trying to have kids, um, I went off birth control and I wasn't getting my period.
mm,
And I was like, oh, well, that's not going to go well for this process.
yeah.
Um, so by then, I had been introduced to, and I was very grateful to have kind of a holistic approach to things, and not just run to the OBGYN and Western medicine doctor and do exactly what they said. Because if I had, like, I probably within like 3 months would have been on a whole fertility path,
Mm,
um, which super upsets me. That's a whole nother podcast for us
yeah.
to
Yeah.
talk about. Um, but, basically kind of diagnosing me with this or that. And I'm like, I just know there's more to it than things aren't working and I'm going to get it going with a drug. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, but one of the most profound moments in that, particularly that early mothering journey, was um, I was in one of my own coaching sessions, but I was doing a body work kind of breath work session with my coach, and in this breathing and like opening up my body. And I had, and I don't know if I remember now if it was prompted by a question from him, but I went into it with an intention to keep like revealing and uncovering, like, why isn't my body cooperating? Like, what's
Yeah.
going on here? And I just had one of those very powerful revelations, so to speak, of, oh my God, I'm terrified to
Mm.
be a mother. And I know I'm kind of like tearing up. It's like I can go right back there. I'm terrified to be a mother. And I'm terrified to be a mother, like, and be the mother my mother had been.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, whoa, wow. Um, it was and it broke so many beliefs, like, well, that's not a nice thing to say about my mother, and now I was kind of over that aspect, but it's still in there. Right.
Yeah.
But I hadn't realized like just how deeply rooted like that belief was, so much so that my whole body was cooperating to make this not happen. The fear was,
Yeah.
and the terror was so strong. So, that just loosened a huge grip, and then, doing some of the other holistic things. Oh, by the way, I was like, I was not anorexic by any means, but I was underweight. Oh, well, that will certainly put a little body fat on, and that's going to help. And
Right.
probably within about a month of that session, I started menstruating. And
Wow.
yeah, yeah. So, I think fear, if I look at all these points, and I have other, stories I can share that were pretty profound in that way, but it was recognizing or having brought to consciousness just really deep underlying fear around.
Yeah.
Well, and so I will do the fast forward really quick just to give the others, so following that and seeing it, the fear I didn't feel like I really resolved in the moment. It kind of acted more out of my unconscious, was now having two little ones. My husband's wasn't quite starting a new business yet, but he's, consumed with his business. I worked until my second daughter was born, but it was overwhelming. Like I
Mm.
felt could talk a little bit about how I was scared and like, particularly my first, didn't know what I was doing. And I felt super lost. By the second one, I
Yeah.
kind of felt like I had it going a little bit more, but still super scared. But I felt like I kind of started narrowing my scope and kind of falling into like some typical, there's a lot I'm proud of that we did, like consciously parenting,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm now in the midst of like, I'm now coaching. I'm now like, you know, in running programs that are supporting women and people to have this transformational opportunity. Like in that fear, I don't want to lose my husband. Like the stability, the scarcity, all that kind of came really strong. And it's like, I'm just going to kind of toe the road, right?
Yeah.
Like we're going to, we're already kind of branching out, doing things a little bit different, but I'm not going to stir any more up in myself or my relationship with my husband. We're just going to kind of go along here. And there was something that as my girls got older, I looked back on with regret, that I kind of followed his
Mm.
direction, like the achievement, lost a lot of the feminine. I was really working on myself and my honoring of feminine principles and the divine feminine and all of that. And it just, that kind of all shrunk, I felt like I really shrunk myself for a number of years to just keep safe and safely
Mm-hmm.
through it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really kind of then when I had that awakening, it was like, wait, but I saw other mothers like stay in it, and women that I knew and women that I was coaching even, right, that were staying, really fully engaged in it, and see the power of it. And I had my, certainly some experiences of the power of it, but even more so, I knew that I missed some of it. And I wanted to raise that awareness for more and more women so we can have the choice, right? I, like I said, if wasn't engaged in this kind of work, I wouldn't even have known the choice was there. And
Right.
that's what I want.
Yeah. Yeah. The choice to question the
Hmm.
assumptions, right? Okay.
Totally.
Um, oh gosh, something so juicy just came up. As you were talking, the thought that came up was just the challenge that so many of us, I people in general, but since we're on the topic of women, how challenging it can feel to mother someone and also have those moments where we regress and we feel like children ourselves in our emotional state or and this, especially when we're carrying attachment styles from our primary caregivers and we're in relationship as adults and now we're mothering children. Like,
Mhm.
I have found and have heard from so many mothers how little space it feels like there is sometimes for themselves, for them to be in their process.
Mhm.
And I have been working with a client, and she loves, loves, loves being a mother to her two kids. She would do it over and over and over again. And she has remarked on how challenging it has felt to not have that time for her own process,
Mhm.
for her own inner child work, for her to throw a temper tantrum, for her to feel like something's unjust or unfair. And so, it just speaks volumes to like I don't know, the capacity that it takes as a mother to be able to hold everything,
Mhm.
to hold the household, the children, ourselves, our partner. And so it takes a tremendous amount of capacity to do that. So one, I'm remarking on this because
Yeah.
I appreciate your vulnerable share around the fact that at times you felt lost, the fact that you didn't know what was going to happen next. And, is I think so often that's not talked about enough
Right.
is how challenging this journey can feel as individuals, but also as the mother of children. Um, so in that, is there anything that as you've gone on this journey and you've had many Phoenix rising transformations, what would you want women to know?
Well, first, I want them to know that they're extraordinary. Right. And I think the fact that everything that you just said about, the work and how hard it is. And, it's hard enough without the distractions of life to focus on ourselves. But children are incredibly demanding. Um, you know, it's our other things can be that way, but there is a 24/7 of it that is, pretty unique. And as you were speaking and like sharing, it's easy for me when it's not me saying it. Like, wow, like we're amazing. Like
Yeah, yeah,
just
we
that we
are.
like, aren't we like just that we do this and we've been doing it forever, like for the longest time. And there's the only bad thing is we're just not getting credit, right? And we're not, we're not,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
and the valuing ourselves and valuing just the everything from the just the sheer energy that we have and wherewithal to like do what we do to the space, and you mentioned that the space that we hold and that we can encompass so much, like that
Yeah.
aspect of I'm going to say womanhood, but, feminine aspect, right brain, however we want to, term it is, what I feel like is a message I just want us all like to start embodying because it starts with us. Like if we don't value this and give it, just everything, when we're not, you don't make money raising a child, right? Like, so it's immediately put
Yeah.
down the list of something that's important, right? And then, so I think if we can start honoring it for what it is and just how amazing and not from this like you should be super mom or super woman and do it
Right.
all, but you are doing a lot
Yeah.
and it's beautiful work and it's needed work. And if we all if we tended to the planet and the world in the way that we And that's, ultimately what I want for all of this is that we see the power in mothering so that we can start mothering our world the way we need to.
Yeah.
Um, okay. So I started with that big perspective, but I wanted to drill down to more practical with it. Which is, so yes, the one, this awareness that we are so cool, but then, there are ways that we can tend to ourselves that may not seem so, it isn't just like, oh, and I'm all for like carving out time, time that isn't the grocery store alone, time that is beyond just, the essentials,
Yeah.
which still, enjoy it and love it, but don't think that that's our ultimate self-care.
Right.
But, yeah, of course I'm going to advocate for carving out time for a, a coach, for things that take you out of that and can give you perspective and allow you to like dive in, like absolutely. And of course, like, personal practices of, you know, getting up early and meditating, like
Mhm.
absolutely. I'm, all for that. But there are also things that we can do in the midst of it that I think aren't talked about or thought of so much. And I'd like to share them, which is, so this whole concept is we're talking about like mothering ourselves and like staying with ourselves and our journey while we're raising kids, because it's
Right.
so easy. And that's, when I say I lost myself in my children, it's like, oh, I could just kind of, I don't want to like dig in here anymore, but there's so much going on out here, like plenty for me to like, kind of do, but it doesn't have to be so separate. Like when I'm giving my kids things that maybe I didn't have, right? Which is another thing. We do sometimes have to learn how to give the things that we didn't give. But sometimes when we are doing it, it's like, oh, I'm tending to my child in a way that I would have liked to have been tended to, is to
Yeah.
imagine myself next to my daughter. So put little me at whatever that age is. So I'm not just taking care of my child, I'm taking care of me too. And literally like
Mm.
start it as a practice and start visualizing yourself. And, when they're really little, like I always coach, women that I coach to like have a tantrum right next to them, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm feeling that way too. Can I'm going to get on the floor with you. And so it's not like about them, make the distinction. Like I'm not having a tantrum at them, but I'm acknowledging like, oh my gosh, yes, like let's do this, like, and
Yeah.
we bought those like foam bats, batakas,
Yeah.
and it's like, let's get the batakas out and like hit the couch, and like, so, there's ways we can, I'm going to call it sneaking it in, but it really like makes a difference to kind of go along with them with what they're going,
Right.
ride the
Right.
wave that they're on. Don't, when we, because if we're going to say like, well, I'll get to myself like after they're in bed,
Right.
like, no, you're exhausted and you're just going to go to bed. So I have to find ways to tend to myself through the day together. And we call it like growing yourself up with your child
I love
and
that.
raising yourself with your child. And it's also never too late to have a happy childhood, kind of roll all those into one and put yourself, into the mix of things. And they don't know that you're picturing little you right there and,
Right.
and holding you, as a baby and all of that good stuff.
That's such a beautiful concept, one that I myself have never considered. But you had mentioned earlier that you felt as if you and your mother were enmeshed. There was an
Mm.
enmeshed relationship, and this sounds like there's differentiation. That there is a sense of integration with oneself while you're raising your child. You're raising yourself
Yeah.
up, and so it's not this enmeshed or sort of codependent dynamic with the child, but there, what I love so much about this idea is that there is one, a validation of the child's experience. Like, yeah, you're
Mm-hmm.
having a tantrum. I totally get it. Go for it. Like, rage, feel your emotions. Because so often, so many of us were shut down. Like, there was no space
Totally.
for our emotions to be present or for anything other than nice and presentable to be there.
Mm-hmm.
And then, two, you get an experience yourself as a human. as a person with emotions, that, I think it's this unspoken agreement that, as particularly for women, I don't
Hmm.
see this as much for men, um, that once you become a mother, like, you should have it all together. You should
Right.
know
And
all
you're
the
supposed to know
answers.
how to do it. Right.
Yeah, just know how to do everything. Know how
Hmm.
to cure every ailment, and like, and you're right. I've heard from so many mothers that the one thing they want most is acknowledgement. I just want to
Hmm.
feel appreciated. I don't have to do less. I'm happy doing and serving in the ways that I do. And I just want to be acknowledged and
Yeah.
appreciated for how I show up. And so that's another thing that I'm hearing you say in this is,
Yeah.
it has become, in some ways, this thankless job that is just assumed that you do it, you shut up about it, and but it's by far the hardest thing, I think,
Yeah.
the hardest job that
It
exists.
is. It's the hardest and most vulnerable. And,
Yeah,
it's a top challenge, it really is.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I can't imagine being a world leader either, but it's up there, right?
It-
Like
I would agree with you.
it is.
I am neither a world leader nor a mother, either of those yet.
Well,
And
you are a mother. You
I
just don't
am,
mother
you're right.
children.
Yes, we have learned. I am,
Mhm.
yes. Um, and I would agree with you. It's up there. It is absolutely up
Yeah.
there. So you talked about vulnerability, and I have seen, I've experienced many kinds of mothering in my life, from women in my family, from my own mother, from myself. And I've experienced varying levels of vulnerability across these women.
Mm.
And I know that can be generational standards, there are cultural standards for vulnerability, but would you consider vulnerability to be one of the most important aspects of mothering? Or what, if you had to boil it down, are the most important aspects of mothering
Mm.
that, if these qualities or emotional states are present, will really lead to a more enriching experience for everyone?
Yeah. I think that's, just what you said there, the being in touch with our emotions and a willingness to, you know, in the midst of it all, be raw and available emotionally and being able to, because when I can name my emotion in the midst of all that chaos, like I bring myself back to myself. Like why I would say it's the most important one you're modeling for the thing that we forget is like we think we can just like do our children versus the fact that, and you saw, I think profoundly from my example, like it was my mother's example and the modeling. She could have said anything, but just being with her was the thing. So, you know, how I operate, and if I'm okay with my emotions, if I allow them and have space for them, I'm letting my children know it's okay too, responsibly, right? I always kind of preface our emotional states with responsibility. Um, but the payoff in all that, because what we're talking about in this transformational opportunity or rewriting the mother code isn't like an easy path, right? It's and so to some it may be like, oh, why would I do that? Almost like natural childbirth, like what? No, isn't the idea to like numb all that and just like, kind of have the goodies or whatever? It's like, no, the goodies are all of that. It's like, it
Yeah,
is feeling it all fully. And, that's one of the things I would say I felt like I missed out on was like kind of turning myself off to those feelings for that period of time, but feeling it fully because then um, you're available for
mm,
those precious moments, for those glimmers of connection, that are possible, like with your child or with your husband or with a partner, with, mothering, whatever you're mothering. It's our availability that really only comes when we are vulnerable, when we're
right.
willing and vulnerable, and any of our emotions are vulnerable. So, even in our full joy, we're vulnerable. But that
Yeah,
exposure, yeah, and we can get hurt. We've, like you said, we've been trained to like for all the reasons of like why it's not okay, to
right.
have them fully, and maybe it's even dangerous. It feels like, or they were so irresponsibly expressed in our family that we just assume they're bad, right?
Right, right.
Not really realizing it's like, oh, that's where the richness is. That's where the depth, but particularly I would say bringing us to the present moment so we're available, to
Yes.
experience that moment.
Yeah.
And whatever it is, and kind of whatever's happening in that moment. And I
Yeah.
think what goes along with that too, I just wanted to mention this is because also like, when we don't do that, then like I've talked about like losing myself in my child, but what happened in my relationship with my mom, what I've seen other women do that don't do that is then you live through your child, right? Like then
Yes.
you're, and we
Yes.
haven't quite named that yet. And that's, totally understandable when we don't know, another way or that, but it's like, oh, I'm going to have that childhood through them. I want to
Right.
make sure that that distinction is made. It's not like through them. It's like a parallel, co-voyage, so to speak, not a like, oh, I'm going to do all these things, and you're going to be the me I didn't get to be. And, certainly work with plenty of adults who had parents like that and whatnot,
Yeah.
that it's, that's what we want. I feel like it's a huge disservice to whoever and whatever we're mothering.
Right. Yeah. It's almost, putting the burden of our perceived unfulfilled potential onto someone else who has not
Mhm.
even yet been able to make a decision about what they want for themselves.
Exactly.
That was
And
something I myself experienced in, and I have a great relationship with my mother now, but she wanted to give me what she didn't have. And so there was a lot thrust upon me
mhm.
that I think turned out in many ways. And I can sense that that's something I think, when left unchecked, can be something that slips under the radar.
100%.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So if you could, I mean, this is a huge question. However, if if you could boil it down to like the your greatest lesson or breakthrough in mothering, whether that was mothering yourself, your children, maybe even mothering your mother,
Mhm.
um, what is the one thing that people can walk away with as like, if you knew this one thing about mothering, this would really
Mm.
just be a great starting point?
I think the one thing, and if I'm looking at like talking to the part of me like, that shut down when I got afraid, is the risk is always worth it, right?
Mm,
The mixing it up, the going into the unknown territories, that all will be well, and that, there's a perspective I can have now. And this is what I'm claiming in my, menopausal, like crone wise woman phase, right? Um, is kind of a bigger perspective that like what feels so, I don't know, impossible or scary or challenging right now, is exactly what you should go into. Right.
mm,
And, you know, to the extent that you can have that courage to like follow, and go for your full satisfaction, and remember that you being satisfied, if we're talking really any realm of our mothering, but say it's in a family, just use that example, your satisfaction, you being satisfied, tended to and taken care of, is what is going to be the best thing for the family, bar none. Bar
yes.
none. I don't care what anyone tries to tell you. It is oh no, it's so selfish like that. Nope, not, not at all. Not at all.
Yeah.
So I know that was kind of, I wove in like more than just one thing, but hopefully it kind of felt like a one-ish message.
Yeah. No, I think a lot of women I have been waiting for that permission to have more focus on themselves, especially as mothers of children, where the
Mhm.
focus then becomes placed on the child. And so having that permission and hearing it from another mother, I think is so, so, so valuable. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
100%.
So where can everyone find you and
Mm,
what kind of work are you doing today?
Sure. Well, I'm doing any and all manner of sharing this message, but I do one-on-one coaching. I do workshops. I do masterminds, things like that. So whatever's kind of going on is on my website at drgertrudelyons.com. I also have a podcast, Her. So the emphasis on the her and mothering, I'm rewriting the mother code. Um, and on Instagram, I'm Dr. Gertrude Lyons and LinkedIn also. So those are really the main places you can find me and find out what's happening, what's going on.
Awesome. Thank you
Mm.
so much. I'll be sure to
Oh,
include all of that in the show notes. A
absolutely.
wonderful conversation that just went in so many beautiful directions. Thank you for sharing your perspective, both as a mother and a professional. And I am sending the intention for this to
Mm.
reach all of the women and perhaps men that it's meant to reach.
Well, it's been a huge blessing and honor to be with you, Lee. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.